S09E18. That's all we need.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, Alex, and with me I have Mike. How are you, Mike?
Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, very good, very good. It's certainly better after a week of 2 wins on the board. I mean, we're sitting here last week chatting to Logan about the 2 losses in a row that we'd suffered and sort of the implications potentially of, a third or a fourth loss coming into these games against sides sort of in and around the same positions as us in the table. So to come away with 2 wins, it was tremendous from that. Starting with that Middlesbrough game, how did you see that? I mean, 1-0 down at halftime in that game, sort of staring down the barrel of that 3rd defeat in a row.
Yeah.
How are you sort of feeling at that point?
Yeah, I think it's gone from what potentially could have been 3 defeats in a row and some real questions about what's happened to us to now, obviously, we'll talk about Middlesbrough and then Cardiff, but to now be on track for potentially a 3rd win in a row is a lot of emotion, and it never ceases to amaze me how much emotion we have to pour into this football club.
Yeah. I mean, we'll probably talk the closing minutes of the game in a bit, but that was certainly heart and mouth sort of moments. But going down 1-0 after what was it, 6 minutes or something? You can't help but feel like maybe it's trending towards that 3rd defeat in a row.
Yeah, it was a pretty slow start, I think, to say the least. You could tell we hadn't necessarily found our feet, and I think it was probably a few factors. One being that we had lost 2 in a row, and now we're staring at a 3rd defeat. But I think like Philogene out, I think I had made a note that said we'd so often just gotten the ball to him to make sure that he could do something with the ball, and it felt like we were still missing that. Like we were still trying to play a game without a player that suited the game, and I think it took us probably the first half to really find our feet, and we were lucky not to be down more than 1. So thank you, Boro, for some woeful shooting.
Yeah, it's funny after the Watford game where you could probably criticise us for being really inefficient in front of goal to then have almost an identical game in reverse against Middlesbrough where they were very inefficient and actually let us back into the game as a result. But it's, it's hard in some ways to sort of cast your mind back to at halftime of that game. I'm sort of sitting there thinking, apart from Slater and maybe Connolly, everyone seemed to be having a really poor game. There wasn't any effort being put into making runs off the ball. There was no creativity. We'd sort of get into the final third and then reset back to Allsop basically because there was no one making space or giving players options, where it just felt like we had no spark. And as you said, with Philogene out, that was a real concern. You sort of think, is it really, a sign that we've become a one player team, where with him out, we just had no spark. And so to see, I guess, the changes on 60 minutes and the turnaround in the team within the game was really heartening.
Yeah, I think what concerned me was, and it's definitely not necessarily equating the 2 players, but when Bowen left, that had a huge impact on us as a club. And in my head, I never want to see us relying on one player. And I think the first half of that Middlesbrough game had me thinking, have we just centered our entire play around this one player that probably will leave us next season, given the form that he's been in, unless we get promoted. I think if we do get promoted, then he goes back to Villa.
Yeah.
So coming out to the second half, and I think we'll talk on the changes that we made, but it just felt like a completely different team.
Yeah, I mean, even before the changes to an extent, it does seem as if in recent times, I'm thinking like the Swansea game's another really good example where if we put in a really poor performance in the first half, you can usually be confident that you're not going to see that repeated in the second half, even from the same players. So even before the changes, I thought we had a bit more energy about us. Even from the first few minutes of that second half, I think Connolly and a few others had a few reasonable chances. But then, I think we're seeing a sort of flag that, Carrick's a good manager as well, was sort of reading what we were trying to do with the game, changing their shape to sort of counteract us. And so Rosenia pulled the trigger on 60 minutes. We got Tufan, Traore and Vinagre all coming on for us. And that really made that difference. I'd sort of say maybe even with Vinagre, it was more when McLaughlin then came on for Greaves to shift to left back that Vinagre was able to get forward, where Vinagre's potential was really best felt and obviously contributed to that winning goal. But even from that 60 minutes of change of making those changes, I think we saw that shape and that intensity from the team lift. And I think Tufan in particular, when he came on, really put that effort in and was really putting a shift in to get us back into the game.
Yeah, Tufan's been at least the last two games, and obviously Cardiff and Boro has been a change player, similar to the way he started this season. Because I think he had scored in a few games in a row, and very early on in the season he'd already got into 4 or 5 goals, and then he got injured, and now having him come back, it almost feels like he's hit that form again. So he definitely showed a lot of that creativity, and at the moment, we're talking pushing Vinagre up further up on the left. I think he's a lot better of a left winger than he is necessarily as a left back or a left wing back. I think his attacking play is much stronger than his defensive play, which is strange given we probably signed him as a left back. And I'm really liking Greaves as a centre back this season compared to left back last season. It just feels like he's a lot more assured of it. And I think we've seen him making runs from our box to the opponent's box, taking a shot. And I think there's just a lot of confidence going through Greaves. But yeah, bringing on McLaughlin and pushing Vinagre up further on the left obviously gets to the winner. But I think, if we can, unfortunately, his injury he's not had the best luck with us. And it's going to be pretty tough seeing him sit on the sidelines again.
Yeah, for sure. And talking Greaves at centre back, I mean, a very rare sight indeed of scoring from a set piece, essentially, with Greaves flicking the ball on for Delap to score. It was a pretty quiet game from Delap in general, but obviously, the sign of a good striker is popping up in opportune moments, and he's there to put away, as easy a headed goal as he's going to score in his career, you would think. To get us back level and a bit of quick play from Greaves to flick that header onto him was good to see.
Yeah, it was beautiful. I think I wrote down unreal goal, perfect delivery, perfect header, and then a composed finish from Delap. I think it's really easy to overthink that from Delap, and just to see him, head down, really get over the ball was great. And then Tufan running to get the ball just to head straight back was awesome to see.
Yeah, it was interesting because this game was on beIN down here in Oz, so we didn't have Fletch doing the commentary for us. It was a neutral commentator, and it's interesting when McLaughlin came on for Delap. And it's probably fair enough. Commentators' first instinct is, it's Hull settling for a point, but all of us in the chat were saying, oh no, this is actually an attacking change because it pushes Vinagre forward, it gets us more width, gives us more opportunity to get the ball wide and into attacking areas. So it's actually a positive change, even though normally you'd say taking a striker off for a centre back is clearly a defensive one. It worked quite well. We sort of already talked about the fact, Vinagre getting forward, providing that ball into the box for the winner that Doherty laid back for Tufan, and it shows, I think, the ability that Tufan has, that he just slots that first time. Like his finishing ability when he's on form. There's almost no one else at the club that you'd rather have the ball in that position to put the chance away.
Absolutely. And I think just for me, it was really nice seeing Doherty involved again. I think it had been 4 games straight on the bench, and even then against Huds he only played 1 minute. So I think he had about 20 in the Boro game, and then 25 in the Cardiff game. Just it's nice seeing him back and around. I don't know if he'll get a starting 11 spot, but it's just nice to see him getting minutes.
Yeah, it was quite opportune timing that Logan and I were talking. We've sort of been doing reviews on most players in the squad over the course of this season on the podcast, and Doherty happened to be the player last week that we were looking at. So for him to pop up, not only with more minutes, as you say, but obviously the assist for the winning goal in this game was pretty awesome timing in that sense as well. But then, I think Jones got player of the match on Sky, but that was clearly because they decided on it before the final few minutes, where Allsop pulls off a pretty ridiculous triple save. Yeah. But it's easy also to forget that he actually pulled off a pretty decent couple of saves a bit earlier in the game as well. So really, all up, his game was terrific. And considering, I guess, the form or the question marks on him over the last couple of weeks, for him to put in a performance like that was really awesome to see it. And it's a great reminder of the fact that he's not just in the team for his feet; he's actually a great shot stopper as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the criticism has always hasn't been on his shot stopping. It's been on the decisions at the back in terms of playing it out. And I think what we've seen over the last few games is that there's the no nonsense approach now. So if he can find a 100% safe pass, he will play it. If he can't, he will boot it up. And I think we've seen those long balls actually working in our favor. And we'll talk about it in the Cardiff game. But those last 3 seconds in the Boro game probably aged me about 30 years.
It was the equivalent of a last minute penalty save, I have to say. Like in terms of just that stress, especially after the first shot, where you think he saved the first shot, he's now on the ground, the ball's now fallen back to a Boro player, and you kind of go, you just keep expecting the back of the net to ripple with the ball. But he's somehow, I mean, I think he's probably fortunate with the second save, it sort of hit right at him, but then that third one to sort of get half up and get across to get a palm to it. And you see all the players go to him. I think it's moments like that that can really turn the season around. Not the right phrase for it, because our season didn't need turning around. But in terms of the energy and the togetherness that sort of moment can forge in a team like ours, I think is priceless.
Yeah, almost like a second wind for the rest of the season. And I think when we were watching it, equated it to Ben Foster's save against Notts County for Wrexham.
Yeah,
and they were 3-2 up in like the 96th minute. And it felt very much like that. And it felt very much like okay, we've done this, now let's keep pushing forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, then I'll get your votes for this game and then we'll chat Cardiff.
Allsop, 2 fan, and probably Doherty for 3 for the 1 point.
Yeah, good shouts indeed. Yeah, I couldn't go past Allsop or 2 fan for the 3 and the 2 either. I thought 2 fan off the bench, his energy really contributed to that turnaround in the second half. I went Slater for the 1 vote purely because I thought, in that first half, which was so poor, he was probably our standout player, and the effort and energy he brings week after week is really awesome to see him back in the team. Obviously we'll talk Cardiff in a second, where he actually dropped to the bench, but for his first start following his hamstring injury, I thought that was a terrific display against Middlesbrough. Right. Well, we'll talk Cardiff now. And this was almost like a completely different game in terms of it was just complete dominance from start to finish, and to the point where, I mean, I think I sort of compared it to the Rotherham game where, any doubts about our success in the game were really washed away quite early on, in terms of we just looked so much better than them. And so any worry that we might drop points in that game were pretty much diminished, except I was sort of worried that, we've seen a few times you have those huge spells of dominance and then all it takes is them to score on the counter and suddenly you go, what's happened here? We suddenly drop points out of nowhere. So to get that first goal in the first half really sort of set the mind at ease. But I was just amazed at, if there was a loose ball or we misplaced a pass or anything like that, we found it so easy to win the ball back because whether they were just sort of sitting back, letting us retain possession, I just felt like there was no intensity from them, which just really played into our hands.
Yeah, I don't think Cardiff showed up to play. I think it was, I think we performed very well, but it was heightened by the fact that Cardiff was so poor. And I think any other team probably in the top 6, if we were to play the way that we did in like the second half after we scored, we probably would have conceded. So thankfully we were already 3 up. But I think, Connolly had a perfect chance very early on and it's just too casual. And when he missed that, I thought this is going to be one of those games where we have chances and one, like as you said, on the counter, we'll concede. So it was nice to see that after the first half, we're still 1-0 up. And then obviously the second half, the magic really happened.
Yeah, and actually that Connolly chance early on, you touched on before, also knowing when to play those long balls. It was about the 2nd or 3rd minute and he pings a perfect long ball over the top of the Cardiff defence to unlock an acre of space for Connolly. And it really set the tone for the fact that, it's not just going to be a series of short passes out from Allsop. It's going to be switching it up with long balls as well, meaning that the Cardiff players just had no idea what to expect from him.
Yeah.
Which was great to see. And then, so Connolly, putting that miss aside, able to just slot away the chance from Delap later on in the first half. I thought initially that he looked offside and I kept waiting for the flag to go up. And it's only been after a couple more replays that I've sort of accepted, actually, I think he was onside for the goal. But, great commitment from him to be in the right place at the right time. To have 3 players now level on 6 goals for the season, sort of equal top goal scorer for us as well, shows, as we were touching on before, it actually is a great sign that we're not, actually it's 4 players, isn't it? 4 players on 6 goals, showing that we're not a one-man team by any means.
Yeah, it's been great to see. And I think Delap, he's very quick with the ball, but very balanced and very good feet. And we've seen that to assist Connolly. I think he also had a shot from outside the box on his left foot, which tested the keeper really early on. So it's nice to see someone like Delap always trying to find a way to goal, and if not, playing the right pass.
Yeah, absolutely. And so between Tufan, Delap, Connolly, and Philogene to have 6 goals from each of them is a great contribution. And Delap, a goal and an assist in consecutive games as well. Great for his confidence. And as you say, I think it's just that close control. He sort of waits for the defender to overcommit, and then that gives him the space to get to the byline and get a ball in. And he's great at keeping the defenders on their back foot, unable to really predict, because he seems like he's got confidence on both feet, so you can't really tell which way he's going to go with the ball at any time, which is a real strength for him. As someone that size, to have that sort of ball control is a real credit to him.
Absolutely.
And then, as you said, second half, that's when the magic happens. You sort of called it pretty early on. I'd say maybe it's a case of broken clock is right twice a day, because we've been saying for a few games now that that free kick from Twine's coming.
No, when he missed the first in the first half, I knew immediately that he was going to score one. That was close in the first half.
It was close.
It just seemed like he needed another chance. And there was just so much about that goal that I loved. My favorite part is the Cardiff player getting booked for not understanding the fact that his wall has to be 10 yards out from the ball.
And he's like, but they're doing it. It's like, but they're not on your team, mate.
So that, and then just, I think Twine really needed that. I think he scored now in the last 3 home games in a row.
I was going to say, he's got 3 goals in his last 5 games, which sort of creeps up on you.
Yeah. And I think, that goal against Rotherham probably was very much needed. And I think he's now started to find his feet. And you can just tell how happy he was that went in. But not just him, it was the whole team. Everyone was excited for him.
It was like another Allsop moment where it's like 100%. Everyone was just celebrating it. Yeah. You can see the relief on his face when it went in, because I think everyone in the stadium's thinking he's finally got his free kick.
I mean, we've been talking about it since he signed. And even before, when we were first linked with him, I think last season, that he was known for his free kicks, and to have always been putting his hand up to take them, and to have gotten so far away from scoring that it seemed like each week he was just getting there. And now to have got there, at least we can say that, we have someone that can take free kicks and can execute now.
Yeah, for sure. And then, of course, the third goal as well. Brilliant ball over the top from Morton, finds Tufan, a couple of great touches, and then just delightfully chips the goalkeeper. I actually hadn't realised that Bullet, the Cardiff manager, had managed Tufan previously at Fenerbahce. So he knew sort of firsthand the experience and the quality of Tufan. And I think after the game, he was saying he'd back Tufan for sort of regaining his spot in the Turkish side with the form he's showing at the moment. Although he did sort of it was almost a backhanded compliment, because he did say it's almost that Cardiff let him play that well, which I'd agree with to an extent. But I think with the way that Tufan was playing in that game, with the energy, his pressing, like even before the goal, he was my man of the match, because he was just putting in an imperious display, and that goal just capped it off.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the best games I've seen Tufan play.
Yep. Yeah. It was terrific from him. And the technique for the goal was fantastic as well. And I guess the sort of, bonus or benefit of being 3-0 up as early as we were did mean that we were able to sort of run out the game quite comfortably. We got to give minutes to Vaughan, Smith, and Sellers Fleming, who all got minutes. I think it might have been Smith's first home minutes or first league minutes, one of the two. Sellers Fleming got on recently, and obviously Vaughan has sort of been out with injuries for a little while. But great to see all of those kids essentially get runs and get minutes in the first team.
Yeah, given that I'm not sure how many minutes they'll get, it was nice for Vaughan to get 10, and I think Smith and Sellers Fleming came on for the last couple minutes.
Yeah, Vaughan almost could have had a goal, really. I mean, I think he was almost surprised at the ease of that chance because he should have just picked a corner to finish it off. But another great ball in from Tufan. It's nice as well because Tufan was almost in space to take the shot himself, but having already got his goal, he's sort of looking to play Vaughan in and get him a bit of confidence, get a first goal for the club as well. But wasn't quite to be.
He'll get there.
He'll get there. Absolutely. Well, yeah, look, I couldn't go past Tufan for man of the match for myself, for my MVP votes. Twine, I gave 2 votes to that free kick and then all-round display as well. I thought he was terrific in this game. And as you say, I think his confidence is growing week on week, which is great to see. And then Connolly for the 1 vote. I thought another, to back up a 90-minute or close to 90-minute display against Middlesbrough with another 90 minutes against Cardiff, given the fact that he's had his injury doubts or troubles over the season for most of it, it sort of reminds us that, he is a quality player, and it's probably a timely reminder given the fact that they're probably going through contract negotiations at the moment for an extended deal for him. He's sort of reminding us that he's someone worth keeping around. I thought it was another terrific display from him.
Yeah, that's fair. I had Tufan as my number 1, then Twine, and then I chucked Morton in there because I think we almost forget about him sometimes, but he's so solid in that centre mid role and played a few good balls in the Middlesbrough game and the Cardiff game and just had a very, very solid game.
And recently named the EFL Young Player of the Month, I believe, under 21, which was an awesome recognition for him as well. So yeah, absolutely. He's one of those players where, I mean, maybe somewhat in the same category as Slater, where when he has a great game, you don't necessarily notice him because he just keeps things ticking over. But an absolutely quality player to have in our midfield as well.
Yeah, for sure. And the ball over to Tufan was unreal.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Also brilliant news during the week, we saw confirmation of Rosenior signing a new contract, 3-year deal, taking him through to 2026. A bit of a rarity in football these days for a manager to get a new deal. We've just seen Steve Cooper sacked at Nottingham Forest after getting them promotion to the Premier League. Was it Alex Neil and others going at clubs this week in recent weeks, meaning that Rosenior's, I think, now 8th longest serving manager in the championship, which is pretty remarkable, but just shows the job that he's done at the club, the turnaround he's made from the position we were in when he came into the club. 52 matches now managed as well, so he's sort of creeping up there in terms of games and experience, which is all really exciting to see.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked for that, and I think we've seen him evolve as a manager. And what I'm concerned about, not concerned about, but that I hope our supporters and our fan base kind of change up is when we do have those 2 to 3 games where we don't necessarily win, is to not jump on the back of him and say, hey, let's get him out. I think he's shown that those games where we tried passing out the back and we tried playing through didn't necessarily work from the Allsop perspective. He's tweaked it, he's changed it, and it's evident to see now. We went from 2 games to two games lost to now 2 games won, and always coming back in the second half if we've been down. So I think he's created a really good culture around the club, and it just seems like the players want to work for him.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so the fact that we can see that in-game management and tweaking where if we do have a terrible or just even a poor first half, that confidence that we will turn it around or that we'll at least see something different, because so often in football, people complain about managers not having a plan B or I mean, we have in the past certainly complained about managers not changing things up in game to try and get something out of it. So to see or to have a manager who will always be trying new things, will be trying to change things and make something happen, to know that we're never really out of games, that we're always going to be looking for some way back into a game and not just sort of cop it and just sort of go into damage limitation mode. Is really heartening to see, and it's a really exciting place for the club to be. And when you've got a manager who kind of has the whole club pulling in the same direction, from recruitment to I saw recently the article that he said the players all get Christmas Day off because family is so important, that the players need to have that connection and the trust that he has with the squad to be professional and to be able to rely on them to be back on Boxing Day in good condition. Is such a good thing to see.
Yeah, 100%. And I think in the Middlesbrough game, when Tufan scores, he celebrates, but he runs straight to Rosenior.
Yeah.
And I think that just sums up how much the players value him. And I think we've seen situations where players and manager haven't necessarily gelled, and it's very noticeable. So I think what we're seeing is the complete opposite. And when we can, we have to cherish that. And so having him till 2026 is really important.
Yeah, and it speaks volumes to Tufan in particular, who's been in and out of the side in recent weeks, even while being fit, that it would be quite easy for him to be a bit resentful or a bit sulky about the fact that, he's got his goal against Middlesbrough and he could be sort of standing there saying, look at my quality, why aren't I playing more? Instead, he's running to Rossania, as you say, and it shows the camaraderie and the togetherness that club and squad and manager have, which is really awesome to see.
Yep.
Well, we'll talk Boxing Day now. We've got, not Boxing Day, 23rd of December 1st. We'll talk Bristol City, who are a Friday evening game in the UK, Saturday morning here in Australia. I thought initially this game was also on beIN Sports, given the Friday night kickoff, but looks like it might be on Tigers Plus instead, which is always good. 7 a.m. kickoff is a nice, manageable time slot for us here in Australia, so we're always welcoming of that. It's been sort of an interesting run for Bristol City because we played them back in August where we drew 1-1, where it could have easily been a loss. I mean, they were sort of smashing us in terms of shots and chances created, but we managed to hold on for a 1-1 draw under Nigel Pearson for them at that point. They've now brought in Liam Manning from Oxford after they sacked Nigel Pearson back in October. But it's been a sort of a mixed start to life as Bristol City manager for Manning, with 3 losses in their last 5 games. Which does suggest that this is a pretty ripe fixture for us to look at getting 3 wins in a row.
It does. I would have agreed with you if they hadn't been Sunderland.
True.
But that being said, there's 2 factors that I want to think about. And one is we haven't beaten them away since 2016, which is obviously a long time. But prior to that Sunderland game, obviously quite poor form. They are scoring, so I don't think many of those games have been a shutout other than the Southampton game, which rightfully so. But that second half against Sunderland were all over them. And I think if we can perform the way we did against Cardiff, we should put them to the slaughter. I think in the second half, Bristol had 1 shot the entire second half and Sunderland had 9.
And was it a penalty? I think they scored against Sunderland as well. So you could argue potentially that then didn't create a whole lot, but then as you say, scoring a fair few goals as well at the same time in other fixtures. So I sort of look at that as maybe that's a good sign for us that they'll be a bit more open and attacking, because our passing game does seem to suit teams that, create that space and kind of come at us rather than the low block that you might see from like a Huddersfield or someone like that, who I say that, but then of course we did put 4 past Rotherham. So hard to know. I think typically away from home we seem to perform a bit better though.
Yeah, for sure. And just looking at the stats of that Bristol Sunderland game, Bristol had 33% possession all game, and we've really done a lot better this season when teams aren't necessarily pressuring us but are actually sitting back a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Cardiff, for example.
Exactly. Yeah. So I really want this to be a game that we go there and we start the way we did start against Cardiff, because I think if we start that way and we don't let Bristol City get comfortable, especially at their home ground, I think we really take that win. And I think my prediction here I've got is a 3-1. But no changes to the starting 11. I would play the exact same 11 as I did against Cardiff.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting one because I think Lakilo's fit for this one. So he's the only one I'd potentially look at getting some natural width into the side. But in saying that, as you say, to beat Cardiff so comprehensively, I don't think you could really argue for anyone being dropped from that team. So maybe you do just go the same 11.
I'd put him on the bench for sure. I think he needs some minutes. And I think hopefully it's one of those games where, we're 2-0 up and we can get him on just to run at defenders.
Yeah. It's interesting listening to a few neutral podcasts this week, and we were only one of 2 sides to win both our midweek and weekend fixtures this past week gone, the other being Leicester, who absolutely flying at the top of the table. But it does mean that now as we sit there in 6th place in the table, there's a few more people starting to take notice of us. And I think it's been interesting that we've had, I'd say, a pretty consistent season in the sense that we've not really fluctuated all that much in terms of league position. But in saying that, that's probably been because we might win a couple of games, then lose a couple of games, draw. Like there's not been a huge streak of wins or losses for us. Obviously, we had the 2 losses in a row being the most. 2 losses was the first time under a senior that we've lost consecutive games. But the significance then of actually getting the 3rd win in a row is that you start to draw that notice or draw that attention of, this team on a winning streak, sort of pushing into those, 3rd, 4th, 5th place positions in the table as well. Leeds and Southampton probably tough to chase down, but whether it's just even West Brom that we could look to push ahead of into 5th and really cement that spot in the top 6 and start to put a breathing space between us and the chasing pack is a real sort of opportunity that we have in this game.
Yeah, and I think 2 of our next 3 are against teams in that 12th onwards. So I think we've got Blackburn and Sunderland after Bristol, and I mean we'll talk Sunderland after Bristol, but I think if we can pick up that win at Bristol, then we go into a Sunderland game that I will put as probably the most important game this season so far, given that they're only currently 3 behind us. And depending on results of the following week, if we can really finish the year with that win, we're really starting to pull away from the middle of the table and cement ourselves as a real playoffs contender, which is insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll say a 2-1 win against Bristol City to sort of match you in predicting a win. But we'll talk Sunderland now. And you sort of touched on it there. I put it up there with Aston Villa under Nigel Adkins. I don't know if you remember that game in particular, the game where we were right on the edge of the playoff places. I have a feeling it must have been early in January. And I think we went 2-0 up early in that game and they pegged us back to 2-2. And that was around the time that, Bowen was absolutely firing. I think Ehab was sort of suddenly realizing, oh, hang on, actually, we're a decent chance at the playoffs here. And he starts talking about investment in January and backing Adkins for promotion and all that sort of thing. And I think we all started getting a bit excited about this sort of promotion push out of nowhere. And we went out and signed Liam Ridgewell as our only January signing and completely, choked
capitulated.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that's not the case here, but in the sense that I feel like this is almost our biggest game since that Aston Villa game where you sort of thought, if we win this game, we're genuine contenders here.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, there's still half a season to go.
Yeah. So it's not do or die, but just in terms of statement of intent. Yeah,
I think this one is probably more for the players than it would be the fans. A win against Sunderland says to the players, we can do this, and we've got the quality to really take to the top 6. I think it sends a message to the rest of the league. I think for the last few seasons, no one's really looked at Hull and thought, oh, this is a team that's been in the Prem 3 to 4 times in the last 10 years. Like, they're not going to get there again for a while. And if we do beat Bristol and we get to Sunderland and win, not only is that 4 in a row, but that's now potentially 6 points clear of Sunderland, who people had been speaking about, saying that they're going to make a push. And I mean, you look at their previous results and there isn't much consistency. There's not much flow. I think they lost they had 2 losses and then a draw, 2 wins, a loss. Like, it seems to be going very much up and down, kind of the way we've gone for a lot of the season.
In fairness to them, though, I mean, the 2 wins being against West Brom and Leeds are pretty impressive. But in saying that was under their caretaker manager. They've now appointed Mick Beale permanently, who, I mean, it's pretty rare to get such a negative reaction from supporters to a new manager being appointed. But I think he's a pretty unpopular option at this stage. I mean, that could change if he pulls out a few quick wins for them. But it means that the game against us is all of a sudden it's a lot like the Wayne Rooney at Birmingham situation, where I think, the manager needs to get a few early wins to win the fans over. And it's almost like he's under pressure immediately. Where if we were to score an early goal, for example, I think the atmosphere at the Stadium of Light, because I think it is an away game, isn't it? Or is it home game?
It's
actually, no, I think it's a home game. So okay.
I don't know.
It is a home game. That's right. Because the MKMs are pretty much sell out for that one. So scratch that. I don't think we're going to get a negative crowd reaction if we were to score early. We'll get a positive one. But it does put a lot of pressure on that Sunderland team straight from the off.
Yeah. And I think that's I mean, we always talk about the new manager effect, don't we? So I'm hoping we can negate that. But from what we've seen in the past, typically the first game under a new manager has been a victory for the team that's changed manager. But I think
that's all right. They've got the game before Christmas. They can get that out of the way.
That's true. That's true. We're there to spoil the party as well. I forgot about that. I think this is a huge game, and I think it all rides on how we play at Bristol. And I think if we win Bristol, we go in with a lot of confidence. But more importantly, if we lose at Bristol, we have to go to that game and say, okay, we lost. That's fine. We have to win this. Yeah.
And look, they've got a number of dangerous players. They've assembled quite a good young squad. They've got Clark in midfield, who, I mean, is probably rivaling Philogenes for the best winger in the division at the moment. Of course, the Joe Bellingham brother to the more famous Jude. And even Pritchard up top has been pretty reliable for them in a number of ways. But it's interesting in that sense, they don't seem to have a recognised striker at the moment ever since they sold... his name's gone out of my head. They sold their striker to Southampton, who did well for them last season. So they're sort of a bit of an interesting one in that sense. I guess it makes them a bit more unpredictable than they would have been once upon a time. But it gives us that opportunity, as you say. I mean, it will be interesting to see if we do. I'd expect that we'll make some changes either between the two games, being so close together. And I guess it's an interesting one actually to raise with you that, for me, in our side, I look at someone like a Jean-Michel Seri as potentially one where he's played a lot of minutes. I don't think he's actually been rested at all this season so far, and of course goes off to AFCON reasonably soon. I'd look at either the Bristol City or Sunderland game as maybe an opportunity to give him a rest, first of all, so that he gets a bit more consistency between the two performances, but also to potentially start to problem solve for what does our midfield look like while he's away. And whether that means like a Slater and Morton combination potentially, I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's a tough one. I think we can't do that for both games. I think we'd have to pick a game to do that. At the same time, I think this is him getting... I don't necessarily know if he necessarily needs the rest before AFCON. If anything, he'll probably need the rest after AFCON. So I think by the time he gets back, we would have had to play a combination like Slater or Morton, and potentially even Doherty getting minutes. I'm curious to see what our team looks like during AFCON, just to see how we... Because I think the only people we're really missing are Seri and Traore.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So not a huge impact. And, you know, I forget about the timeline on Philogene, but I think he's a few weeks away.
I think it was 4 to 6 weeks. So I'd guess sort of 3 to 5 weeks now.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we were talking about Sunderland having no necessarily out and out striker. I mean, Jack Clark's got 10 goals this season.
Yeah,
and it's really hard to put him away. I think the last few games he's played up top, so I think naturally he seems to be moving into that striker position. And you know, you're right. They're a dangerous team. You know, obviously you can't go past Triantis from Central Coast Mariners.
I was just hoping when Silvera came on for Middlesbrough, I was like, if he scores a goal for them, it's just going to be the worst. So yeah, if Triantis does something for Sunderland, it's pretty similar. Yeah,
I think for me, if Rusin, who's one of the Ukrainian players for Sunderland, scores, I'll feel quite upset. But I think there's a lot of confidence to go into this game, and I know that, you know, they do have dangerous players, but I'm unsure why Bellingham came off the bench and only played 20 minutes in their last game. So maybe there's something there. I mean, we'll see in the Boxing Day game, or, you know, the next game, if maybe he's a bit injured, or they're trying to work him. You know, losing Bellingham would be pretty big for Sunderland, because I think he played 20 minutes in that game and they lost 1-0 to Bristol.
And I think he's another option that they've sort of been using up top sometimes as well.
Yeah, and you can see why. He's scored 4 goals this season. I think he's pretty much played every single game.
Yeah, got the winner against West Brom, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Ross Stewart, who I was thinking of in terms of strikers, so they haven't really replaced him since he moved to Southampton. Yeah. What are you thinking score-wise for this one?
Yeah, I wrote down 1-1.
I read my mind.
Yeah, I think it's too cocky or ambitious for us to say we're going to go to Bristol, we're going to win, and then we're going to go to Sunderland, and we're going to win. I don't know the last time we had 4 games on the trot where we've won.
Probably League One, I reckon.
I think so. And in the same vein, I'm happy with the draw against Sunderland, and I'm ecstatic with a win against Sunderland.
Yeah.
So
I think 4 points from these 2 games, I mean, is pretty common. Whenever we've had 2 games to preview, it's been pretty common to say 4 points would be, a good return. I think 3 points even potentially isn't the worst. I think if it was to be 3 points, I'd rather the loss against Bristol City and then the bounce back against Sunderland, to sort of keep that buffer with Sunderland. But yeah, look, 4 points or above is a great return from these 2 fixtures, I'd say. So yeah, I was thinking 1-1 as well. I don't want to be the party pooper, but I also don't want to, as you say, you don't want to be too cocky and saying, yeah, we'll get through these 2 games, easily with the 6 points.
And I think the next 2 games for Sunderland are very similar to the next 2 games obviously we played them the second game, but their next game's against Coventry, who are 2 points under Bristol. So it's very much, we have the same next game. So it all depends, if Coventry go and somehow pull off a win against Sunderland, then I'm okay to lose to Sunderland if we beat Bristol. That being said, obviously we're never okay to just lose. So I want us to go there and really perform. I mean, we're at home, so we should have that sold out crowd really pushing for us to get that win. And I think spirits would be really high, not only around the city going into the new year, but I think just around the club to say, we're 6 months in and we haven't slipped.
Yeah. Heading into January, you sort of, I think I've said before, the value that can be added to a January transfer window with the performance, of sitting there in either top 6 or just outside, to show players, we're the real deal. We've got that opportunity for them to come to the club, enhance their reputation, potentially, earn a promotion to the Premier League, makes the job of selling the club to players so much easier than if you're sort of 10th to 12th and you're sort of selling them on the dream, but you don't have too much evidence to back it up. I think especially as well, you look at, Philogene, Delap, Morton, and the success that they've had with us as well. It's becoming easier and easier, I would assume, to talk to younger players and convince players to come to the club.
Yeah, and I think we had briefly talked about January, and I'm sure we'll have another ep just to talk about transfer and rumours, because I love rumours.
Yes.
But I think what we do in January, and I think I've said this to the boys on the pod, is that we need to bring in people that have executed at a championship level to really.
That's definitely happening.
I mean, I don't want to talk about it because I think
it's pretty much confirmed, but we can leave it.
Yeah, no, we can briefly mention it. Obviously, we're talking about Billy Sharp.
Yeah. It's an interesting one.
Very.
I mean, and look, the argument's been made, and I sort of grudgingly accept it, that you can't help but think, if you're chasing a game or you're 1-1 heading into 80 minutes or something, and you have someone like Billy Sharp to throw on the pitch rather than, no disrespect meant, but like a Harry Vaughan. Yeah. Billy Sharp is more likely, if there's a corner or a set piece or something, to just be on the end of a chance and bury it for the club. So in that sense, that experience and that even off the pitch, like his experience and know-how of promotions and the fact that we do have such a young squad, to have players that have that knowledge and experience is so invaluable.
Absolutely. And I think I may have ruffled a few feathers with Dan when I called Billy Sharp a bit old.
He's only 2 years younger than Rosenia, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, and I think the more I've been thinking about it, the more I'm seeing him as almost a Matty Fried towards the end of his career. Fried was probably historically has been one of my favorite Hull City players, and just knowing that he'll find the back of the net even if he's not moving.
I was going to say they're probably pretty similar players.
Yeah, and I see a lot of Matty Fried and Billy Sharp, and I think Dan had said it and you had said it. It's the experience that he might be able to impart on someone like Delap that might just take Delap's game to the next level. And to think that Delap has another level to go is crazy, because he's just so good at the moment. And I think there are rumors or talks of potentially signing him permanently. So that's really exciting. And the fact that we can attract someone like Delap, and you've even said it, like Philogene and Lakilo, like these young players that have come and have been like, I want to play for you. I want to play for Hull. I see the vision that Racing is creating is exciting. And who knows, Billy Sharp might just be that I'm not going to say level-headed because he's not. But someone to come in and say, look, I've done this so much within the championship. I can execute. I've seen this happen. Like, this is what we can do to get us from where we are in the playoff spot through to the playoffs and potentially even to the Premier League. So it's interesting. It's an interesting signing if it does happen. And I'm really curious to see what happens with him.
I think he's a similar age to a certain Dean Windass when we re-signed him under Phil Brown. So I know football's very different these days in terms of, those older players not having necessarily the same impact, but all he needs is one moment and who knows what could happen for him. It would be, probably getting a bit ahead of ourselves to talk too much about playoffs, but he is the sort of player that just brings that experience. And 130 goals in the championship. He's the record goal scorer at this level. Hopefully he can add a couple more goals to his CV before he signs out from the championship. I guess the last thing to say in this game, I found it a bit weird that we play Bristol City for our second time before we play Sunderland for the first time. I don't know why the fixtures got a quirk like that, but it'll certainly be a big couple of days around Christmas. We'll have another episode this time next week to go through those two games and look ahead. I think we've got Blackburn before the new year, and then Sheff Wednesday just on the other side of the new year as well. So as you were saying, like, that's a great opportunity to get, if we were to come out the, if we were to come out the other side of Bristol City and Sunderland with another 6 points, with Blackburn and Sheff Wednesday as the next two games, all of a sudden heads are turning and you're going, hang on, we're suddenly potentially getting on quite a roll with a decent winning streak building up.
Yeah, I think we're in a spot, especially with Rosie, where he's not going to let that affect the players. And I think we've seen behind the scenes, like, I'm loving the behind the scenes stuff that the club's been putting out this season. I think it's really brought the fans to another level in terms of closeness to the actual club. And I think from what we've seen and from what the players have been demonstrating, it's very much the job's not done, no matter what anyone says, until we lift a trophy or we see where we are in the next season. And the 6 points, big if, against Bristol and Sunderland, really gets us kind of getting Leeds and Southampton looking over their shoulder a bit, because then there's pressure on them to continuously keep picking up points, because then they know if they don't, well, we're right behind them. And their safety in like third and fourth, and then even West Brom, who are tied with us on points, need to start recognizing that, we're not just the team that came up from League One. We're not the team that just won League One and bounced back and then have been relegated from the Premier League, but we're starting to really put together a strong side that's consistent and can challenge for a spot in the Premier League again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting times, and can't wait to see how these two games go. But look, thank you for joining me for this one, Mike.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
And thanks everyone for listening in. Hopefully it is another 6 points for City, and we'll be back here to talk about it next week. So until then, come on, City.